Well, I left school at 15 and I served my electrical apprenticeship as an electrician. Initially as a house wiring, and he went broke, fell in love with poker machines. I was out of a job after my first year because he gone broke, and I scored a job at the local colliery as an apprentice electrician, so I worked there till I finished my apprenticeship, which in those days was 5 years. Then I'd finished my trades course and I wanted to go do more, so I started my certificate course, which is now called the diploma course. But that was only in Cessnock, that only was a first year common for mechanical, structural, electrical, whatever. So if I wanted to continue past that, I had to go to Newcastle, to TAFE at Tyres Hill, which I did. Left the job at the pit and got a job at BHP. So then I did that for 4 years. Then I did a couple of years post, picked up the subjects that I'd not on the electives. And then I wanted to go to uni, but I hadn't graduated. But at that time it was year 12 come in, so nobody left school, so I was able to scab into uni as a mature age student at 26 actually. And so that's how I started uni, because I realised that the difference between doing your trades and your diploma is you knew what to do, like to do a particular job, whether it's high voltage, low voltage or whatever, but you didn't understand why, the theory of it. And I realised that without the university education, I knew all the why, what to do, but I didn't know the whys. So then I did uni, which you can do 4 nights a week for 6 years, 3 hours a night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Sometimes Friday, depending on who was teaching, because there were a lot of part-time lecturers in those days. And so then I did my degree for 6 years. Well, again, Ampcontrol's kind of motto is I can't, you can't, but we can. So collectively we need everybody in an organisation, from the cleaner to the tradies to the non-qualified people who are as important to putting something together as the person that idea it is, who designs it, who draws it, it's then got to be put together. So it's a whole team of people, but the people with usually the vision of what should come next are the people with the higher order education, the university or the masters or PhD people. And Alan's a good example of that he had the vision for doing a lot of things we did that other people wouldn't have had. And that's where you need a whole cross-section of everybody, from the ideas to turn an idea into a finished product.
Well, the conversation, it goes back to Peter's aspiration to get closer to the university, and at times it can be problematic. It originally started because we were going in for an ARC linkage grant, and we had the aspiration to invent an 11 kV inverter. So initially the idea was to create a vehicle to retain the IP. But the conversation with the executive team and Peter was that this is an opportunity. And the opportunity is that our philosophy at Ampcontrol, the drive to, especially those growth phases when we moved up from 4 companies to 27 at the time, was we invested in our people. That was the strategy. And what we saw in ResTech was an opportunity to be on campus. There was a time then we changed the model in electronics where 1 in 7 for the people were actually on research, but you had this conflict between operations and research. So could we do it over here? How could we have more fluid engagement with students, with academics? So hence the model was created. And the model was to be able to not only complete the project that we had in front of us, but to create a new opportunity for growth by looking for blue sky research, which is not normally aligned to a operational company with its, it's profit driven. This gives us a chance to have a back room of engagement. Well, in that phase is where we were looking at, the industry had two golden ages for manufacturing. One of them was electrification, which is when the power stations and the state grid was being formed. But then that period was a period of industrialisation. So that in particular, the massive expansion of the mining industry, the investments into processing of metals within the country. There was also the issue of the expansion of the grids and power factor. So we had multiple range. That was days when we set the KPI for the companies that 20% of all budgets from all companies had to have new services or new products. Otherwise, we wouldn't accept the budget, it would be sent back. So it was not aimed at particular, but it was driven by each individual company, but using ResTech as a resource to support the different models. And we split the company into manufacturing, technology and service, and had it vertically integrated on the purpose that the model was simple. You bought our manufactured product because it was our technology and we serviced it. You bought our technology because we integrated it and we serviced it, and you service it because it's our technology and our equipment. That was the simple model. But it was driven by a clear innovation agenda with the innovation applying to those two different groupings. The manufacturing model, which was truly just integration, invention of our own key technologies, and what should that be? And then part of knowing what was feasible was also part of the decision making, and services have building up the skill set to do it in a novel manner. And that's where we saw us go into cable repairs and etc.
Yeah, well, also you had to get the customers to have the faith in you, because as Al said, we'd come up with these ideas and we knew we could do it, but we had to convince the customer that to have the faith in us too, for him to stick his neck out. Of course, in many cases our customers were not high-tech people, so we had to convince them that this new idea had these benefits, but it also had the risk, or they could see the risk. And being associated with the university, that gave them extra faith in us that we could do what we said we could do. So once we had that, the university as part of our team, if you like, the customers were willing to take the risk on us doing something innovative for them. And their spin-off was that they looked pretty good as a result of what they did as well. Good luck to them.
We used to say we didn't have phase, we just had varying degrees of success. So even the failures, we learnt from it and evolved. So I was looking at the relay progression. Not every set of relay we released was successful, but we moved on quickly from that learning experience. It just got incorporated. So with research, you've got to make mistakes to discover. And I think we had an enduring environment, especially in our electronics and our flame-proof development. They weren't successful years at times, but then they were long. But technology strategy is a long game. There's no quick win. We could try to tell universities, etc. There's no quick win out there. It's a hard slog to upscale and get into the market. But as Peter said, we as a company with investments into ResTech, we had a high commitment into engineering, but our value statement is the guarantees and the reliability. If you ask me for a price to manufacture a substation, it's the same price. If you gave us, you got your own consultancy design and give it to us, we'd do it for the same value. So it was all in one shop, including the development of the new technologies that were required with the expansion of the kilowatts and the kVA ratings of the equipment.
And you're right, yeah, we did lose a lot of money on some jobs, and our commercial arm would say, well, we're not going to do that again. And I said, like, bloody hell, we've learned a lot, we're not going to waste that money. And as Al said, we've learned from our mistakes to make a better product in the future. And, you know, I used a practical example. I was born a month after my parents were married. There were no mistakes made, I wouldn't be here. And they learned because I only had one child. So
I remember the first 20 MVA substation we built. No one else could do it. We took on the challenge. It was a dragline sub. We put it up there and we get the phone call from Queensland that the sub's just bent over as soon as they put it on and installed to get it on the cat tracks. So we sent Gary Hilly up there to try and solve it. But we solved it, and we were the only ones in the market that could have a 20 MVA on a mobile skid. You have to take the risk, but there were plenty of challenges and learnings across the line. There's no question about it.
Yeah, but the other reason for ResTech coming into existence is Alan came to me and said, look, there's a lot of PhD graduates and masters that we're losing because there's nowhere for them to go into Newcastle. And so he said, if we start up in collaboration with the university and we can use those graduates, then we can take on other work for other organisations. And there was a Chinese war between ResTech and RELEC and Scientechnic at the time, that ResTech were doing work for opposition companies to RELEC and Scientechnic. And they were broadening our experience via ResTech, but also they were making money for the university and for RELEC as the shareholders, but we were employing graduates or postgrads that we would have lost, or Newcastle or the Hunter Valley would have lost to Brisbane or overseas or somewhere else. So that was the other driver for ResTech being formed, to retain that ability within the University of Newcastle.
Look, there was always an aspiration for the uni to get closer to industry, and this was an opportunity. I think it was a cultural shock of how to make it happen. It was frustrating for both parties to start with, because one of the other agendas we had was to, we're co-funding a chair in power engineering, and in the we end up funding 2 lecturers in power engineering. So it's about helping the university to be more market driven in terms of its coursework and its subjects to be, and that contributes to the quality of the graduate and the benefit to the uni, to Ampcontrol, because we did have that graduate program as well that they would transition across. Have we learned it? Look, a lot of the things that I learned with ResTech is what I've translated into the NIER model. It's industry-led, market-driven. It is about research education. We've got 206 PhDs at the moment. We're graduating about 50 and half and going straight to industry. That's the change in the model. So we are there as a university in learning to work with ResTech was part of that transition. One stage there, ResTech was up at NIER as well on the upper floor. So.
But ResTech also, the other thing that we did, or as part of our formulation strategy, was to teach the postgrads other aspects of business. In other words, to quote for a job, to break it down into its parts, its cost, its labour. Quote for a job we designed stuff for Hydro Tasmania. And we either people came to us because they had a problem for us to solve, or we took a solution to somebody for them to exploit. But ResTech taught them the business management side of being a professional engineer, that there's a cost involved, you've got to get the cost back, you've got to make a profit, you've got to create employment opportunities, all the things university doesn't teach us that the big bad world does when you get out there.
Like I said, some people say to me, how do you like working in a university environment? They're getting used to me. And that's the same philosophy with ResTech. I think it's adapting, and we have to ultimately praise the university because we are willing. There's a university now, 50% of the research income is now coming from industry. That's the transformation. And back when we established ResTech, it was probably less than 2%. So that's the learning curve. I'm not saying it was a straight line, I say it was more like a J curve. But if you start a new process, a new way of doing things, you have to adapt and learn. And I think universities had its challenges, Ampcontrol's had its challenges, ResTech was the piece in the middle. And the value of ResTech is time dependent and what the challenges are. If they provide a solution to a real rigorous problem, that's a one-off, as opposed to helping to develop a next evolution of technologies is a long-term benefit that we'll measure in 3 or 4 years. But I can see that in there when you show me the relays based on the HBB and all that. I was joking, I'm the only one that remembers most of how we made up those initials like CSM I was telling you the other day. We had fun doing that. Even ResTech, the marketing came in, Lee Stephenson, and telling me this is all the bylines. We came out of competition, then it came into my room, it was technology research, and they said tech res doesn't sound right, so we flipped it and made ResTech. Yeah. And we still can't, it's still technology through research, which was what was the motivation for it. We wanted a new set of technology through research, not simply something being designed on the shop floor.
Well, one of the early successes was down in Tasmania, they don't have an MEN system, multiple earth neutral system, and they used to get open circuited neutrals, and then all of a sudden the current was going to earth, and that caused electric shock and some deaths. And they resolved that with a device to plug into one power point in a house, and that could pick up the problem. Now that things are either evolutionary, like the next car that comes out is going to be an improvement, hopefully, on the one the year before. But there's also revolutionary, and they're the bits where I think ResTech comes up with ideas that people have never thought of.
Yeah, I say the best thing that I'm personally most proud of is the people. So I said, I always have a saying in the boardroom is that the best advantage, the competitive advantage of the organisation is the fact that we could reinvent our IP within 4 years. So that minimised risk. We're not a company that just invested in a static technology and try to make money out for the next 15 years and watch it decline. I mean, when we were releasing an IPB, we already had the IPC invented. We were just waiting for the competitors to see how they react, and as soon as they invent theirs, we put ours straight into the market. But that was all the people, all the solutions, all the wins was the commitment of the individuals, and it was their journey. And there's one thing about the company is that people were on the long journey with us. It wasn't a transactional relationship, was a career with the company, and you see that with the many names that have been involved in ResTech and in Ampcontrol that were there from early days to the growth of the company. And the biggest cultural thing was, I remember when I first joined the company, I think we were about a total 100 of us. And when I left, it was something more like 700. We gave up trying to remember everyone's names. It's something we just couldn't visualise what that success would be, but we allowed it to happen, but it was the people individually. It's not one person, it was everyone across the company given the opportunity to grow. And ResTech was another dimension to that from the academic point of view, to not compromise their academic journey if they choose to, or work with the company.
Yeah, with your employees, on the research side of things, you've got to give them a challenge that enthuses them rather than frightens them. Because if you go too far, they'll just say that's impossible. Well, you can't go that far, so you do it incrementally to get to ultimately where you want to be. And as Alan said, we weren't scrupulous in our dealings with our opposition. We were bloody ruthless. And we'd released something knowing what it was. It had its not faults, but shortfalls. And we'd encourage the opposition to take the bait. And then when they took it, they'd spend all the money to develop a competitive product, and we'd have the other one an even better range to release them. But they'd spend a lot of money, hopefully, to get half the market. And all of a sudden we'd smash them, they got none of the market. So our opposition tended to fade away.
I believe that the current energy model is not sustainable, but there'll be new opportunities coming. I can't tell you exactly what that will be, but organisations that are nimble and invest in change are the ones who will take advantage of it. And I think getting down to the fundamentals of the technology and how we utilise energy is the bread and butter of Ampcontrol, but also that's the strategic. You turn ResTech into a strategical advantage because we can and others can't. And the market can become lazy, and I think we're going into a phase where it will shift and it will be dynamic. Oh, look, ResTech's one of those ones that you have fond memories of. It was something new, it was outside the box. It's one of those ones where we did take a risk. The J-curve was a bit of a loss there for a few years, and then we're trying to convince the board that this is a good investment. But to see it here 20 years later, to be here is strong. To be able to sit here beside Peter and share those memories, I think it's important we don't lose sight of how we got there. And there were so many learnings, so at least celebrating is a time to pause and look backwards and say, this is how we got there. And I tell you what, it was a long path. I did it for 19 years. And the growth and it was turbulent times, wasn't it, Peter?